Hi, Guy.
Hi Ray, how's it going?
There's no camera on this, so you won't get to see me.
Can you just sort of give us a quick sort of overview of Reset and what it's about?
Okay, the reset's really been born over quite a long period of time, with quite a group of us being fairly unhappy with what we see in the world, local, regional, national, international situation. And there's a small group that we're aligned to that have been looking at ancient history, certainly going back to sort of Alfred's time, and looked broadly at the Constitution, common law.
So is this kind of Freeman on the land type of stuff, or?
Really, no, no, no. It's really more looking at the roots of our common law and what's taken place in the past, and looking and picking out things like the great charters, of things like, God, I got my head together. I think things like Magna Carta, Alfred's Law, the Bill of Rights, and a number of other sort of happenings, sort of 40 plus apparently, that really have been almost resets of what would you could loosely call a constitution, but I know we don't have actually a written constitution, but there's more or less sort of an accepted process. And those sort of resets or revisiting what has been the sort of the balance, if you like, in the past have really not taken place since the 1700s, and we can start to question why. But if you look at what really occurred in the 1700s, there were lots of changes, and effectively the money barons sort of got together and decided that they were taking, this country and the rest of the planet in a different direction. So what the reset is saying is we actually have an enshrined right to go back, to effectively use some of the aspects of the convention to call referenda from a local point of view, and using the parish system, and bring about some changes. And the process is tried and tested. It's not been tried and tested for a long time, but it really rests with the parishes and the wards, and there is a process for actually being able to do that. And whilst I'm not massively au fait with it, I've got a broad idea of the skeleton of it. But the idea really is to garner as much public support behind the idea of all the different groups that are out there that are saying, "Oh, come on, this is just ridiculous. What's going on here? Nothing is working," and we know the plethora of reasons why that is. What we're saying is this is the reset's really like a rallying call to get all these groups together, under the idea of using some of the ancient practices to reform and start something completely new, and look upon the old as just history. It is within our grasp to actually call local referenda that can become conventions that actually can have, if there's sufficient of us that do it, that can have an impact, that can actually turn around and say to this despotic bunch of, well, we can call them whatever we like, that frankly we've had enough and we're going to form a new way. So we actually can create our own governance, which can rise from the people, and that is a process. So we need it populating. So we just need people. We need more and more groups, and we need people to come forward who are prepared to. We're using the term ambassador. I'm not so sure that I'm wedded to that term, but we need people that can get their head around the need for change, and that can articulate that, and that can get together local groups, and help us unite those local groups through the parish system into regional groups, so that we have some regional representation that can join a national convention that can effect change. And we've got to be looking at all areas of existence, from housing through fuel, through well, energy, fuel, through transportation, to just the whole plethora of everything, really, and look at changing, well, not changing, look at upgrading and updating the way we behave. Certainly looking at money, the Bradbury pound, and there's lots of different sort of ideas, lawful bank and different ideas out there, but it's really getting experts in different fields to come together, and with a groundswell of the populace, a bit like we did with poll tax, where we basically said no to poll tax. Well, we've got to say more than no. We've actually got to conceive something new to replace what we have now, which is painfully not working, and create something new. And one of the big hooks is the tax system. We've had one or two economists look at the tax system, and basically what they're saying is that if we introduce something called total economic activity levy, which is a 1% on every commercial bank transfer, then the money we'd raise from that would be $1 trillion more than is currently being raised by the exchequer, for obvious reasons, because of course the big corporates are paying no tax. So I can pitch that over quite nicely. We're currently, we've got about 300 odd taxes that we're all suffering, and it's only the middle and the lower.
So, sorry, I got a really squeaky chair. So do you see the actual sort of tax side of things, for example, as if there was a very small 1% levy on financial transactions within the banking sector? From what I understand, that would probably cover just about everything on its own.
Absolutely, no question. Yeah, it would. It would give such a surge of money to that could be spread evenly between, say, the constituencies. If you just broke that figure down, it'd be 200 million to every constituency. Well, I know our constituency doesn't get remotely, a few million. If that was spread between all the constituencies, and there was a sufficient money with that 1.5 trillion to actually pay everybody a living wage of somewhere in the region of, every adult, somewhere in the region of £7,500 a year, well, which would cover all the necessities. And I know what the elites cry. They say, oh, everybody will be sitting on their backsides doing nothing. Well, there have been a number of studies out there that actually says quite the reverse.
Yeah, because basic income's been tried before in lots of different places, and it's had the same results in every single place it's been tried, in the people who otherwise had no way to actually get anything done. Now they've got a bit of money and they've got the basics covered, they can actually start spending time thinking, well, how can we make the community better? And all sorts of businesses and social initiatives spring up to deal with the problems of the community. They start growing their own food, they start producing their own electricity, they start improving their own schools, everything, because there's no sort of barrier to sort of getting things paid for and so on. So this has been tried around the world. I think the first big test was in, was it Canada? It was one of the early tests in the 70s of basic income. But there's been things even before that.
Do you know, guys, this is something that I wasn't aware of until going to the Zeitgeist annual conference just recently. And I heard a PhD student or a person studying for a PhD doing a thesis on it. And I couldn't believe there were a number of these studies just showing how vibrant and what entrepreneurialism it actually stimulated, just as you're saying.
Yeah. And they found that even in very basic ones, like there was one done, I think it was a couple of years ago, one of my friends in Brazil, they went to some of the favelas there where it was just basically desperate poverty. No one had any money whatsoever. The crime rate was through the roof. And even with a very small basic income, they were able to radically change that community for the better. Just by taking away some of the poverty. Everywhere throughout the world, whenever you see a reduction in poverty, you see a lot of the problems go away. However it's achieved, through basic income or through, creating like a money-free community, like an intentional community or something like that. Whatever approach is taken, as soon as you take away that poverty, crime drops, health improves, all kinds of beneficial things come from it.
But yeah, it does seem to, and it seems to be that everywhere. But of course, the elites are telling us that we'll all sit on our backsides, which of course is just completely contrary to the reality.
I think they're sort of thinking of themselves. What would they do in that situation? And they're not like us.
No, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a really good one. So, that tax system seems to be the most attractive part of the idea of actually creating this base of people that are going to step away from the current system, and that would be one of the major sort of aspects of it. But I think, and I probably wouldn't say this actually on air, or maybe I could, but I think it's actually just a step toward actually having a moneyless society.
And that was actually what I was thinking of asking next. Is do you see this as a transition towards an RBE?
Yeah, I do. Well, RBE, go on. I don't know what that is.
A resource-based economy, so a moneyless society.
Yeah, I do. I honestly do. And I've got a very, very good friend in Mike Tellinger. I don't know if you've heard of Mike and Mike's work.
Ubuntu movement.
Yep, he's just written the book Ubuntu Contributionism: A World Without Money, and it's so well honed. He's been actually really started to think about that in about 2007, and I tell you, I've seen him go head to head with major accountants who, with people who really just have money as their background, and he ties them up in knots completely, and they're aghast at how well honed he has that idea, and where people basically will help in a community sphere and get the jobs that perhaps no one wants to do, but it's amazing some of the jobs that people don't mind doing and actually enjoy doing that some of us wouldn't.
Well, the example I always use for that is people who work in sewers. Now, personally, and pretty much everyone I know would be aghast at the idea of having to, basically wade through human effluent. But there are a lot of people who it's their passion to deal with that problem. How do you get rid of human waste? And, to maintain the sewers and keep them flowing and things like that. It's what they do. So just as you've got other people who have a passion for growing food, or a passion for, solving healthcare problems, or a passion for building sustainable housing, it doesn't matter where you look at, whether it's something that a lot of people would think, oh, I'd never want to do that. There's always people there that have a passion to solve these problems, whatever they may be. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, and having a society that's able to play to its strengths rather than forced into dealing with its never-ending weaknesses against its will, it's a completely different way of approaching problems that's much more sort of effective at getting stuff done.
And don't we have some wonderful examples in time, even in our westernized sort of way of living, where we face crises? Don't we have some wonderful examples of that community spirit and how that community actually defaults into working together? I remember so clearly. I remember the great storm of '87, October '87. I lived in a rural area that was completely cut off. Yet you didn't want for anything, because everybody pulled their resources. If they couldn't perhaps get out there and start clearing the trees and rebuilding the properties, many gables and roofs blown off, they'd be there providing the food for the guys doing that. And the camaraderie that was established around that period, no one thought about wanting money. People just got on with the donations that occurred were phenomenal.
Yeah, in more recent times, you've got things like the earthquakes that struck New Zealand, and they had, lots of damaged buildings, energy infrastructure was damaged, transportation infrastructure was damaged, and despite not having the money to fix it, people just went ahead and fixed it anyway, because it's just what we instinctively do. You see, if your community's in need, you go and help it. There's no thought involved. It's just natural to do that. Exactly.
Money just gets in the way, and it's purely a control mechanism, and we all know that. So I think certainly we that think about it a bit, yeah. So really, that's more or less it with the reset, and the aim is to actually have a new charter, a new grand charter by middle of next year, May June next year, when the oh gosh, maybe miles away, when Magna Carta comes up for its 800th anniversary. Which is really quite fortuitous that we've got that lovely 800, the beautiful homeostasis sort of flowing 8 with its 0 point in the middle, that we should be celebrating or commemorating 800 years of Magna Carta. What better way to do it than to have a new great charter from which we step into a whole new paradigm. We came up with the idea of Reset just over a month ago. We brainstormed this group of people that I described earlier, and from all backgrounds, really such a multi sort of talented task group, if you like. And we brainstormed here on our farm in Alfriston, which was really quite interesting. It's a place that seems to be attracting quite a few fascinating people. The area is very, very anchored in almost anarchy with Lewis. I don't know if you've ever heard of Lewis and the bonfire situation there. Then we've got the Bloomsbury set that were based here, and they created some major changes. But and Thomas Paine was part of Lewis. Now Lewis has an institution called the Bonfire Nights, Bonfire Society, where basically all the laws of health and safety and gathering and that are completely subverted, because there's such a huge number of people that every year traditionally get together and do this thing called Lewis Bonfire. And they burn the Pope every year. they burn anybody else that's been a politician that dare not go where the public should go. That is the area that the energy of this is being born out of. So it's an energy that has some passion. But when we started to actually open this out and started to pitch it to different people, three of us went to an ecology gathering where some of our top ecologists had got together and were really showing, just spouting despair. And there were good people there. The people ahead of Friends of the Earth and Greenpeace, and people, well-meaning people who perhaps maybe don't see some of the dark stuff that some of us see, but definitely want to see change. They're there as people that passionately feel that the planet is being degraded and want to see change. And that talk was concluded by Polly Higgins, who's trying to table ecocide as a crime that the United Nations should have taken on years ago, but didn't, because they were voted out effectively by the oil countries of America, of UK, of Netherlands, and of France. No surprise. And she spoke, and at the end of her speech, she said, nothing short now of a social movement, a grassroots social movement, is going to change things. And then Michael Meacher, and bless him, he's been in the House for 40 years, Michael, and he wrote the lovely foreword in John Smith's book, Genetic Roulette. And he wrote in that, and by writing in that and standing away from the Monsanto lobby, the genetic sort of manipulation lobby, he lost his job as environment minister for the UK, and he really stood up and he said, look, we absolutely have to have a social movement. It's the only way things are going to change. And after that speech, I got up and I said, well, the social movement started. And really what we are is we're a group that are trying to unify the many, many movements that are out there. And if you've seen Paul Hawkins' Blessed Unrest on YouTube, and if you haven't, it's well worth seeing. That was an 07 piece, and he wrote the book in 07, or 06, 07, Blessed Unrest, where he charted the huge number of groups with indigenous, with social justice, and with ecology at their roots. So here you have these ecologists, and then there's politicians saying, look, we've even now got a parliament that is actually not, what was the word he wanted? Not culpable. No, it wasn't culpable, but he used the word effectively not answerable to the public. They're doing their own thing through the bidding, through bidding to the corporations. He said, so we've actually got a situation now where we've got a government that's never going to come up with the answer. They're the ones that have been taxing us for the wars, which is basically an illegal tax. So we have to have a social movement. So when you hear it from that wide group of people, let alone the grassroots, and let alone all of the grassroots organisations that are actually saying, okay, the time is now. The time is for this cohesive social movement. We don't need to call it anything. We're just saying we're going to have a reset, and let's all join together, and let's really honour each other, honour the differences, because this is so important. We need the differences, because the differences will bring. It's a bit like the differences in dialects. It's the differences in customs just up and down this country that we've had such a drive to homogenise, and we don't need that homogenisation.
No, we need the opposite.
We definitely do. We need that individuality. But we also need to find our overarching commonality. And I know that people are finding it. And a lot of people, we use the word love as a commonality, compassion toward each other, gratitude for what we are and what we have. and those commonalities are there, and we don't need any form of division. We just need to respect each other's views, find the commonality, and group together and just make this happen. And I bloody well know it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the same up here in the northwest. So we were looking around, say, Greater Manchester, for example, and we found over 4,000 groups, different groups, that were all looking for change and all generally going in the same direction. So, environmental concerns, healthcare concerns, it didn't matter what it was, all of us were like, yeah, that's something that needs to get better. And so we've started what we call a local transition link. And what we're trying to do is network these groups, because most of them, they think they're isolated. They think they're the only ones thinking this. And when we've gone into them and said, do you know, it's not just other groups around Manchester, but throughout the UK, Europe, and the whole world are all driving in this same direction. And they were like, wow, we didn't know any of this stuff. So I think, I guess what the research's trying to do, it's this task of raising awareness, of getting all these different groups aware that they're not alone. They're part of a much bigger transition away from the old way of doing things. It's everyone's starting to see through the money scam and the government scam and all these other scams. It's becoming plain as day for people to see what the corporatocracy is and what wars are about, and things that even just 5-10 years ago most people wouldn't have even. They would have attacked you if we'd said any of these things. If we'd gone out and said, war is not honourable, they'd be like, no, support the troops, and you can't trust what the government say. They'd be like, no, we must bow to authority. And it's only since really, I think, the internet and all these bad things have been happening and getting worse and worse and worse, that people are now starting to question the system and say it's not what I was told it was, because we were all brought up in this system. From birth, we've been indoctrinated into it as if it's the only possible way of life. And I think now we're starting to, en masse, see that it's not the only way of life. In fact, as individuals, we can all think of a lot of things that would change it for the better. And then we just group together and make that happen.
Well, this is exactly the ethos of the reset, and you've articulated it perfectly well there. And just liking to pick up with something you said about the military. I've got a young nephew that's gone into the military, and I was absolutely aghast when I asked him, and he's in the paras. He's a blooming cable young man, and he's not been had by the indoctrination. He's not been in there very long, and on his first tour back, he'd been to Afghanistan. Came back, I said, what's going on out there? And he said, we're protecting the drug smuggling. Just straight up. So it's not as if any of them are being hoodwinked. That's what they're there for. He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be part of it. Whatever he went into, the illusions he had when he went in, he's certainly not got now. So yeah, this great awakening is everywhere, and we have to really have great thanks. Whilst the internet, it is not, the fact that we can get together in seconds and we can start looking at some of the stuff that's perpetrated so quickly and pull it apart and really get to the truth. The truth is out there, and it's in abundance. And I had a beautiful guy sitting in the house here the other night who's looking at sort of the alternative cancer stuff, and it's something that woke me up. Back in '87, I realised health was about sickness.
It's maintenance of sickness.
Yeah, making sure people stayed sick, so there's a great big profit there. I remember looking at the Hoxie stuff in the States. That he was the guy whose grandfather had been a veterinary surgeon. He turned a horse out to die, and this horse went out into the natural field, natural herbology in the field, and within a month it was curing itself by eating repeatedly different herbs and barks and effectively making a tincture within itself to cure itself. Well, Hoxie's father decided that the veterinary surgeon decided he was going to have a look at that, made it for himself, started to cure people, and of course in the 20s he really had the most monumental of monumental battles with the American Medical Association. And I tell you that if you know this piece, I'm sure you probably do, but it's well worth watching, and that's Cancer, the the hidden, no, so the forbidden cures, cancer forbidden cures. And it shares that story and a few others. I've not seen the whole piece, but it talks about that, and you absolutely see the level of corruption that we faced here, and the tragedy is the level of deaths, and they're going on still. I know some people whose friends are, I'm sorry, got a youngster who's dying at the moment, and everybody needs to see that, and they'll see the level of corruption, if you like.
This one of the things I find on that is that there's still a lot of people that, even when presented with the facts, they just can't accept it, because
it's too big a way for some, because most people like to be trusting and to realize that we've allowed this almost this energy to run amok to such a point where so many people have been taken in with it. But that's changing. And the guy it was interesting talking to last night, he's very much dealing on the alternative side, and he's got a pretty radical alternative that really deals with that issue very quickly. But he was actually saying that if you put people in, and this is a new combination, this cancer forbidden cures, if you put people in front of that have actually got the problem, 80% say, oh my God, I'm changing the direction I'm going. I'm certainly not going to be cut, frazzled, or burnt, or whatever, whichever way it is. But yeah. So that's an interesting one.
It was certainly one of the things that woke me up, because my mum died of cancer, my granddad died of cancer. I've got loads of friends over the years that have died of cancer, and I kept seeing this crop up. And you look back at this history of all these donations in every country to all these cancer charities, Cancer Research UK and all the others, and we're still not really any nearer. They're just putting more money into the same treatments that fundamentally do not work. They kill the chemo and stuff like that kills 1 in 5 patients on its own, yet alone the cancer.
That's how this film starts off. It actually shows you the advances in everything that we've actually had on this planet in the last 100 years, and it charts that beautifully. And it looks at aircraft, and it looks at sort of many aspects. And then it looks at the cancer industry, and we've actually not moved. And when you really analyse it, then you look at what's been suppressed. It's a great piece of film that it's on YouTube. But but people are starting to wake up. But not without lots of people having to pass and pay that price.
Yeah, it's a tragedy, really. But at the end of the day, I think people. It's becoming so obvious now that it's getting harder and harder for the sort of deniers to deny the reality of the situation. I mean, you look, cancer is a perfect case, because there's literally hundreds of cancer cures, hundreds that I've charted since my mum died, and they always come back and say, oh well, there's no major medical studies. It's like, because no one's funding them. And all the studies that do come out, no one ever gets to hear about. They don't broadcast those on the news. They don't tell you about cannabinoids. They don't tell you about the stuff that is it Basinski is doing over in the States. They don't tell you about all these other things, turmeric and vitamin A, vitamin B17. They don't tell you about diet. That's the critical part, is the diet. Eat a little of a lot, rather than what we currently do, which is eat a lot of a little. It's got going back to a foraging style diet. That's where you got all your micronutrients that give your body what it needs to actually heal itself.
Yeah, exactly. And to keep the pH on the positive side, because that's a huge one, and really and oxygenate the cells. That's one of the big reasons for cancer. Our cells are not oxygenated, and our lifestyles are all geared to acidifying the cells, and it's a surprise. But the shift of wealth that there's been over the last 3 years through the pharmaceutical sort of control has been absolutely phenomenal. It's breathtaking, and I'm sure you're aware of the statistic of, what is it, 85 people now on this planet who have a singular net worth, each of them more than 46% of the populace of the planet put together. And that's people with multi-trillions to their name, and it's like, is that not absurd?
Yeah, you don't earn that kind of money, you steal it.
Oh God, no. Yeah. And in the process you commit mass genocide, and that's what's been going on. The the health industry is mass genocide.
For profit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
The same as the military. All these big industries, they all follow the same pattern. Destroy for profit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's going to be reset. And, you're right when you say it's just an effort to try and catalyze and get more groups together. And who cares what name it is? It's just, let's work together and do what we did with the poll tax and just say no. But now we're going to have something new and something completely new. And that's going to be the fun bit. I think that's really, really where just all these different groups who have their different bents can really get together and start to synthesize the new. And, I think you can divide up the new to being needing to be looked at through sort of probably 12 major areas. And, that's going to be real fun.
Yeah. So if people listening want to know how they can get involved or how they can help, what should they do?
If they just go on the 3Ws, thereset.org, all lowercase, they'll find a login. And we do want people to do that because we want to know how many people we've got in a particular area so that we can actually start focusing on groups in those areas to actually start bringing about the constitutional aspect or the bring about the local referenda that can become the regional referenda. Once we've got a few groups in an area, we'll definitely have someone in talking about it, and we'll create some awareness around people who can then continue to talk about it. And we only need 10 in a parish to actually create a local referendum.
Right, so it's not even like you need like the whole parish or the whole area to vote. It's you could get it started with a very small number of people.
Yeah, 10 per parish, and that can they can hold a local referenda, and from that referenda, someone can be elected to go through to a regional convention. Yeah, and that's how we can start, and that is laid down. That's a principle that's laid down.
Okay, so if they go over to reset.org and sign up there and take it from there.
Absolutely, Guy. Yeah, yeah.
And I believe you've also got a Facebook group.
Yes, that's the Reset as well.
Right. Well, it's been great speaking to you, Ray. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Guy.
I've really enjoyed that. It's good to hear that it's the same things happening throughout the UK and throughout the world. So this isn't just some sort of flash in the pan. This is a growing tide of change, really.
I sort of get. I'm surrounding quite a few people that work very much energetically, and they all say the energetics of April and May are the absolutely catalyzing months for huge change. And I absolutely already feel we're powering into it. And in a way, it's borne out a little bit by the trite nonsense that's coming out on the mainstream that actually doesn't add up to anything. Not that I really much watch it much, but just picking up a paper and looking at a headline, it's like, well, what relevance has that got to anybody?
Yeah, I think everyone's starting to realise that now. Turn off the telly, stop reading the newspapers. They're just gibberish, really. They're propaganda at best and gibberish at worst. They're not telling the truth.
Great. Well, thank you, Guy.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Keep up your good work and keep linking people.
I will do.
All the best.
Thanks, bye.
Cheers, bye.